Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Where's Your Heart? Thank you all for tuning in to today's broadcast, and we're going to bring you in live at the moment. And here we go. How's everyone doing?
We are. I'm trying to figure out how to share this thing again because I am not using YouTube to share this week, and now I don't know how to do anything.
It's been a while. But we thank everybody for tuning in right now. We know we have some changes to our marketing and promotion for the week and what our topic is going to be. So we ask you to bear with us as we're moving forward, and we're making sure that we create a level of not only consistency but content that we know is conducive to the environment that we're trying to create. And that environment is to champion vulnerability as a core human strength. So hopefully everybody had a really good week, a good weekend. Today is it's a Monday right now, and my sign just fell in the background. So
no.
That's going to look real interesting. Anyway,
poster.
I know. We'll see if we can put it back up. I think that's one of the best parts.
Question for you.
What's up?
None of the chats are showing up this week.
No?
Over on the right, I don't have any chats.
I have a few.
Private chat. I don't see. I had the Facebook posts or anything like that. The comments.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe there was something that was changed, or something that Torian changed on the platform. I have to be honest. I really don't know. But yeah, I can see some here. We have Sean chiming in. What's up, my man? Good to see you, man. Hope all is going well. One of our past guests.
And somebody we got to circle back to. I'm still working on getting the Walks with Sean here to Albuquerque. And we were writing up our link tree today, and I'm like, oh man, we got to add Walks with Sean to our link tree.
Absolutely.
So one of the goals as we kind of put in some infrastructure is to be able to connect our guests with our audience a little better. So we're on it, but he's a great human. If go watch that episode. Yes. He and his mom came on, and yeah, anyway, good stuff.
Absolutely. So we appreciate him chiming in and just taking a few moments to check in with the family back home. Yep. How you feeling today, man? Oh, you know what? Wait, we got more guests. I got my brother, Gerard LeGrone. My man, 20 grand. We grew up together, man. That's lifelong right there. So appreciate you, man. I know I need to call you back too. Called me a few days ago. I didn't call him back.
Like when you talk about all these amazing humans who chime in on the show, I'm like, I can't wait to travel to Chicago after COVID's over and meet folks.
Yeah. Good people for sure. Good people. So how you doing, man? I know you started to talk about that a little bit, but how goes it?
Yeah, pretty good. I'm excited. I hit 20,000 words in my book yesterday. So
okay.
Like that for me, like that means I'm about halfway to the goal. And it's exciting. I feel like I'm not grinding now. I feel like I'm kind of surfing. Like I get to, like, not everything is a wave you got to ride, but like I feel like I'm able to find seams, and I know how to wait and how to jump out of the water when I'm not ready to surf, So
okay.
It's probably the first time in my life I've done something like this. So it's fucking awesome. It's weird. So,
like, I like it. I like this a little bit.
It's also exhausting though, because I'm enjoying it so much that then I keep doing it beyond what I should do. And so I haven't been holding my boundaries. I've been working too much. So yeah, there's a lot of that, all that. How about you, man?
Week is good. Just really grateful. I'm just going to jump right into gratitude, man. Yeah. Just really grateful for want to be alive, grateful for opportunity. I've had a lot of conversations with people and organizations around just, what is creating real sense of belonging look like? Ooh. How do you create it? How do you sustain it? And really, how do you start to look for and expect different results or better results utilizing different techniques? And it's just an exciting time, I think, if people are open to receiving that kind of a message. because I think we're going to be able to have conversations that we've never had before, which is one of the things that we create here. But then also foster long-term change and change for the better. And then from a business standpoint, business or change that is actually connected to business outcomes. So I'm grateful for that, man. But it's also a real quick story. So I saw a friend of mine on LinkedIn who was posting about a position that she was applying for that she didn't get. And long story short, what she was saying was she had music and pictures in her presentation. And she asked some questions during breakout rooms that were a little bit more, I guess, personal in nature, for lack of a better term, and a few other things that she had in her presentation for a high level job. And she was told that when she received feedback for not getting it, that it made people in the interview feel uncomfortable. And it wasn't a good fit for the organization. And so it was interesting in how she was talking about it, because she's like, this is exactly the problem, right? If people can't have candorous conversations, if they can't bring new ideas and new ways of looking at things, as simple as a presentation to the table, then how are we really going to create this environment of belonging? So I just thought it was a great read, and how she was very candid and vulnerable, and just talking about the whole experience without throwing any organization under the bus. So yeah.
I'm struck by how often not fit for the organization is a gatekeeping code word. Like it. Yeah. Anyway,
It can be. It can be. It depends
and
on.
It's frustrating because there's a real thing there too, right?
For sure.
Like, we're not all good fits with each other, and that's fine.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to get too work related, but since I mean, working directly in this, a lot of it is how do you define those things? And I think what a lot of organizations find is they'll have a mission and a purpose, and you have these things that look good and they're written out, but when it comes down to actually how do we make decisions centered around these things that we say are that give meaning and life to our organization, that's not what we actually follow. So when I'm working with people, I start with, okay, how do you put a lexicon and codify the things that you say believe to be true, and then you can kind of measure what matters from there.
What are the policies that you put in place?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, so I'm tossing. Today's the TalkBack Live, so we're I'm putting our link out there. So if you want to jump into the conversation with us, click this button. Sorry, I forgot to do that earlier, but there you go. It's the StreamYard link. Okay, so here's the question that comes out of that for me. How do you know when an organization is actually wanting fundamental change?
Boy, that's a great question, and it's something I've been talking about over the past few weeks. To me, it starts with the decision makers. It starts with the people who have the ability to allocate resources to however an organization defines success, which is usually EBITDA, quarterly earnings, P&L. And I'm not saying these are wrong measurements, but you can really tell when it's like, okay, we believe this to be a part of our long-term business success, even though we don't know how to define how or what it actually looks like in a tangible. We know it's needed, and we've allocated resources almost like you can think of it from a skunk works department all the way to research and development to really find out organically what this means to us. And that's a hard process, but it's not even hard as opposed to you have to make conversations non-punitive, non-toxic conversations where people feel comfortable being able to talk about things. So for me, I've been talking to organizations, and even even with our podcast, and we talk about, well, we've listened to you speak, right? And we've heard some of the things that you say. And I said, well, I got to a point in my life where I understood that it's not about having a position like this or it being 9 to 5 or somebody coming in and consulting. This has to be a way of life. And for me, this has always been substantiated throughout my life. So yeah, what you may hear digitally should be aligned with how I show up professionally. If there's a dissonance there, I think that's part of the issue that we have in society and in organizations right now. So, I mean, that's my stance, and it probably will remain that way.
Yeah.
I can't foresee that changing.
No, I'm curious about it in part because part of why I stopped working with organizations is because I mean, first off, the way to change an organization is to change the individuals, and not that in coaching I don't change people, but they
Mm,
come to me because they want something to shift in their lives. So I hold space for that and I facilitate it. Right. Um, that same process. I mean, first off, that's how you change an organization is the individual coaching. And when I
mm.
used to do consulting, they'd say we want to change, and then they'd stare in their rearview mirror and worship their, what's 80 years behind them. And I'm just like, nah, dog, that just doesn't. No, it's
Well, and I think the misalignment there is change for the sake of change isn't necessarily good either. So
true.
why is this important? How does this
Yep.
fit into how you measure? Well, the first question is how do you
Yep.
measure success? How
Yep.
do you know you've been successful? This is where we typically go back to the financials, which are, for sure are the blood of an organization. I would even argue from a society standpoint. So I'm good with that. But then you have these other things that should be a part of how you measure success that should be measured. So identifying them, codifying
Yep.
them, communicating them, co-creation and getting buy-in. And then to answer your question more directly, modeling. Because
Living it.
if I'm on the board of directors or if I'm on the senior leadership or executive team and I say one thing, but everything about my decision making, who's invited to new opportunities, who hears about them, who hears about the positions before they even go out, all of that stuff starts to stay the same. Our candidate pool say blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
stays the same. Then, where there's a dissonance and people, we know this, people follow, people buy into, people opt into what they consistently see, not what they consistently hear. Well,
Yep.
let me take that back. For the most part, now we do have a lot what's going on now from a political standpoint where people believe a lot of things that they see, but ultimately what becomes real is our consistent behavior. So that's always my challenge as an executive coach, which is how are we challenging those who want to grow, not for the sake of change, but who want to grow themselves and the organization to model the behaviors that they're actually asking other people to buy into.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I felt like I just gave a whole sales pitch for my consulting business and said all that stuff. But seriously though, I mean, for me, there's really no different than holding vulnerable space on our podcast to actually our approach to working with an organization. So there's a lot of cross pollination for me.
It's true.
Yeah,
True. True. True.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's change the subject, man. I'm rambling too much.
Ah, it's good. You always make space for me to ramble. Come on. Why can't you ramble every now and then? It's good. Um so you had said before we started that you wanted time to share everything. Did you get that done? Have you
Yes,
shared
yes,
social
yes,
media?
yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. We're out and
I'm just
about. We are out and
I'm
about.
doing my check-in. I'm like because I can't
Yep,
see any of the chats popping up, so I can't
yep.
track that stuff this week. Um all right, so last week now.
Yes, last week now. Let's talk about it. This past week, boy, I guess we can talk about it from a. I mean, we talked about this earlier today. I'm not very news savvy these days. I think I think I kind of intentionally check out of a lot of different things because I do believe in looking at and consuming a lot of different information, but I also understand that there's a bandwidth of which you can actually take things in and process them. So I think the biggest thing was the irony of our president getting COVID-19 and how people have seen it. It's been interesting to me to see people celebrate it. And then it's also been interesting to see how people take that and kind of use it as a, this is a superpower type of thing. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's. I mean, I don't wish him any harm or anything like that. I mean, I want him to be okay, just as a human being, because that's always how I show up. But how it's been politicized is pretty interesting. And I'm not even saying it's wrong. It's just to hear the different narratives that have come out.
Yeah.
So that would be my review of the week. Of course, that ties into some of the debates and stuff like that. And I was just telling you in the pre-show, like I'd never heard of. I want to say Poor Boys. Proud Boys,
Oh,
Proud
Proud
Boys,
Boys.
Proud
Yeah.
Boys. So learning about that was interesting, and that's when that's what I sat back and was like, boy, you know what? Maybe I do need to start watching a little bit more toxic TV, just so I can know, what this is. Because I was like, what is a Proud Boy? So yeah,
You
that's
go
my
on
last week.
Twitter and check out the hashtag Proud Boys. It's actual Proud Boys. Yeah, apparently, gay men have taken over the hashtag Proud Boys on Twitter just to fuck with the Nazis, and I totally and wholeheartedly agree. Way to go! I love it.
How about you, man? Last week, talk to us.
No, I mean that's the big thing is the people who are getting it, like this big news splash of all of these folks who have been saying it's not a big deal, don't worry about masks, who've consistently said things like, well, there's a price to pay for opening the economy, and it's okay that people die for it. The number of people statistically that have it right in Trump's inner circle, whether they're senators or advisors or whatever, who were a part of his activities last week, statistically, some are going to die. And I guess, I'm always like, so you're going to live this out? Are you going to be okay with that was the price for your reopening the economy and refusing to wear masks? Like, I just, yeah.
Slap, man. It's really a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. But ultimately, though, I don't, want people to be safe. But I also want there to be, everybody to be safe, which means for me, not only am I concerned about what I think and believe, but how am I, showing up in a respectful way, publicly or privately, for other people who may, believe that wearing a mask is really important for our health. So, yeah, man. Yeah. So TalkBack Live. We really haven't figured out a format for this show, have we? We're still playing around, man. So, TalkBack Live. What does that actually mean?
We wanted our audience to talk back to us live. I don't know. Like, what did we do? We were spitballing one week when we had a cancellation. We're like, fuck it. Let's just roll with the two of us and see what happens and call it something cool.
Yes.
But the goal of this, folks, is we put the link in the thing on Facebook. The goal of this is to have our listeners join us in the studio. So we're hoping to do that. Like, click on the link. It'll put you in a little green room, and then Torian can bring you up so you can ask a question or start a topic. We had somebody, a dear friend of the show. Is Teresa in yet?
She's in. I was just about to say she's in. She's in the green room. So just introduce her, tee her up, and I'll bring her on in.
So I already fucked up the introduction because I should be introducing her as like a treasured guest. This is the person that created our logo. That when we were just kicking off, sat down with the two of us and like asked all these really good questions and last week when I was like, our flat doing what we needed to in this way, she's like, well, we need to fix the branding. And like, anyway, she's one of those just amazing gurus that gets shit done. But then part of that conversation led into, hey, can I suggest a topic? And we were both like, oh, hell yeah, please. And so she's coming on to like kind of pre that topic. Cause if it's fun for us all, then we're going to talk more about it. So this is Teresa Robinson.
Hey.
On Facebook, the real Teresa Robinson.
The real Teresa Robinson.
That's me.
Graphic designer extraordinaire. I like trying to introduce you as like makes me.
You did a great job, Royce. That was
like, oh my gosh,
well,
dear friend.
This is interesting. I was gonna take a nap, so
Nope.
This is good too.
I love it.
It's a pleasure to have you. It really is. It really is. So all we're gonna do now is just have the same conversations we have on our conference calls and our text messages. It's just gonna be live for the rest of the world. That's it.
Yeah, so we'll see how everybody reacts to it.
Exactly.
So you threw some really good stuff out there. Lay it out for the audience.
So, interesting enough, with all the protests and everything going on, which I completely agree with, because I'm sorry, there needs to be some real change made in this country. I feel like there's a lot of talk and no action. So I feel like that's what's been going on for years. So I'm really glad to see that these protests have led to some changes. We're in a really hostile environment, and leadership is not helping the process. But one of the things that actually was a topic discussed between a friend and I was, like, for instance, I grew up in a very white dominated neighborhood when I was younger, up until high school. Have a lot of white friends. I almost feel like I wasn't told that I should hate white people until I got into my 20s. So,
Okay, yeah, I'm with you. I understand. I understand where you're coming from.
so now we're in an environment where the white community is being told, "Hey, listen up, you're racist and white privilege," and I feel like that narrative is a very narrow one, because when it comes down to it, in order to invoke real change, everyone has to be involved. So you can't have a situation where it's only the Black community kind of making the rules, or any other community. We have to come together as one to start making that change. So I got into a conversation with a friend who, for a while, lived in Wisconsin, which I was surprised to find out is like predominantly Black. There's a large Black community there.
Yeah.
And he talked about how he was constantly harassed living there by folks in the Black community. Now, he is someone that never had to think, well, a Black person's like this, or, they act this way, or he never followed the stereotypes. He treated everybody equally. Honestly, when it came down to it, it didn't matter if you're Black, white, red, brown. If you're an asshole, you're an asshole. And since I heard Royce curse, I'm guessing that's okay here.
Do as you like.
But really, that's what it came down to, was the behavior of the individual, not the color of their skin. So we got into a conversation of, really, I think we need to focus, if we're going to look at color, which white person should we be upset with? Because to have the narrative that we should be upset at every white person in America, that's not going to fix anything. So for me, I would be looking more, especially if we're talking about systemic racism, who's making the rules? Because if you're going to spend your days taking it out on every white person on the street, you're really not going to get anywhere. We should be taking it out on the Trumps, on Rockefeller, on everybody, the rich, the ones who make the rules, the ones who are having a lot of control in this country and are making the laws, the like pretty much deciding policy. It really needs to come down to that. Now, I am not going to say, I will be the first one to say racism exists in this country, period. And I think that needs to be said a lot, because I feel like people are so offended when that's said that they don't want to have the conversation. Acknowledgement is a big deal to start the conversation.
I don't want to cut you off, Teresa, but I have a question to ask you, because I can identify with a lot of your story and what you just articulated. I grew up in three distinct, very different neighborhoods. I've never had a disdain for white people just for the sake of being white. I still don't, right? But I didn't grow up in that. So the concept of being in an environment where there was a large group of people who felt that way overtly was kind of new to me. But getting back to your last comment, which is everybody kind of has to be involved. And how do we start to have a dialogue where people aren't saying, well, you as a part of this white group or Black group have to go here. Royce and I were just talking about, like, we haven't really had a conversation of what it means. What is whiteness? What is Blackness? Like, when we use these words, we use them very universally and from the context of our own experience, and it becomes interchangeable. Like, is it the skin that you're born into? Is it the culture that you identify with? Is it your political views? Is it a combination of all? I'm not saying that it should be that or this, but I'm saying a real dialogue around, yes, this, when we talk about white supremacy, this is what we mean, right? There are certain people who fit into that, and this is what we think. And then we can have a debate from there. But I think it becomes so triggering for people, as you said, for your friend who goes to a certain area and people put them in a category, the same reason why it's triggering for me. I never feel good when people look at me and say, oh, therefore he must be this, and they don't know me. I mean, I don't, right? And I understand, because Royce and I were talking about this earlier about power structures, and I agree with you, right? You have to look at power dynamics in any of these situations. But I do think having real, honest, candorous dialogue around this is important. And we have not had that in the black community that I identify with. I'm not really sure about community that would identify as white or Caucasian, but I haven't seen a whole lot of it. And I know Royce and I talk a lot about this because he wants to address it head on.
Yeah.
And my challenge to him is then you have to talk to the people who are least likely to digest it head on. Right? So, I mean, I'm just, we've had this conversation for months. So, anyway, I'm blabbing too much, but yeah.
I mean, even in the conversations, I'm sure you guys have seen the interview, or I'm sure you can see. Kids,
no, it's okay. It's all good. Yeah.
Hey, everyone.
Oh no!
You've seen the interview or the memes that go around about Morgan Freeman, and when the topic of racism comes up, people are quick to put up that meme that says, it shouldn't, we shouldn't be talking about. If you keep talking about it, it's just going to keep existing. So, I mean, it's interesting how it really comes down to how somebody will perceive even just one topic. Because I watched the whole interview. So I get what he's saying. I mean, pretty much when it comes down to it, if you're going to spend your time essentially pointing a finger to why you can't advance in this country, you're not going to advance in this country. And obviously it can be done because there's many Black individuals, celebrity, whether you're an actor, a politician, that have advanced to do what they wanted to do. Mm-hmm. I do feel like, even though we are in a very toxic environment right now, but I will be one to say that I still love this country. I feel like there is still the ability to make something of yourself here. I have created, I developed 3 companies that have been up and down, but I've also been somebody that nobody's going to really tell me what to do. So I would have done it anyway. But I never had that moment that when something failed, that I would go, well, it failed because such and such over here did what. I mean, it comes down to individual responsibility.
Okay, so that's a lot of meat in what you just said. Royce, please feel free to chime in. We just don't want this to be a black conversation on Where's Your Heart Today? You know what I'm saying?
Okay, so I'll say this then.
Yeah.
I need to acknowledge that the baseline that Teresa set out is we have to acknowledge that racism exists. And for me as a white man, that means I have to acknowledge that privilege exists. Mm-hmm. That privilege and bias exist, which puts me in a stance that is uncomfortable because it's one where I have to say I hope that people of color don't hate me, but I totally understand why they would.
But you also have to understand that is not also your, and I am. I'm sure I'm going to have some people that are really upset with me.
No, don't worry. I get it all the time. I know where you're coming from.
Feel like there was only so much responsibility you can take. Acknowledging is good. I think it's good. If you're someone who made your money, you work from the bottom up to become something, you should not be ashamed for doing so. You should not feel that you have to take on the racism struggle all on your shoulders, which is why I feel it needs to be acknowledged. I do feel white privilege is real. It is. But we have to figure out, when do we get past that? And it's not saying, like I said, it's not saying it doesn't exist. What I am saying is, in order to start making change, we can't have that be the topic. Obviously, the change has to be, okay, we know this exists, and we know that in certain areas, this is a problem. What can we do to fix it? That's what we need to be looking at. We can't be spending our time. Seriously? We can't be spending our time.
We give it to you raw here on Where's Your Heart. You get unedited, no production.
Yeah, we can't be spending our time repeating that. We can't be spending our time not taking part in the conversation. Because I feel like, yeah, that's one conversation. We need to come together to have it. Then we, speaking for myself as a Black community, need to start figuring out how we put ourselves in the narrative. So if you're complaining about there is not enough government representation, that there's more white people discussing what should happen in the Black community, we can have no one but ourselves to blame for that. We should be taking up being in city council, being in school, on the school board. We should be in the talks. If we want to make a change in our own communities, we need representation on those panels, on those boards, all of that.
And the policy making.
Yeah. I mean, it really comes down to, even with voting, I mean, and it is, I mean, I already have people telling me like they're not going to vote this year. And I try to, tell them it's really important you do, but I can understand why they don't want to.
Well, yeah, it is important that you do, and you also have to realize that there are other parties you can vote for.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like there's a Green Party, there's a Libertarian Party, and I'm not saying you should vote for these people, and I know some people are going to be triggered because they feel you're canceling the vote, and but see, this is why the deeper part of the conversation that you're talking about is so important and that we're not having, right? I really think it is as simple as when we say white supremacy, like what do we mean? Like for real,
Exactly.
What does white supremacy mean? Does it mean that if you are a heterosexual white man that you are a white supremacist? Because that's kind of what I hear.
I'm on life.
Right?
As you can tell, I have like.
It's okay. It's all right. We're flexible. It's all good. Here, let's get the widescreen so we can see him walk up.
Yeah, I actually saw a YouTube video the other day, which it astounded me. Pretty much the basic narrative was, when it comes down to it, because we have a two-party system, while there are all these other parties, we have a two-party system. And really, this video I watched, I still can't believe I'm going to say this. It came down to the Black man who said why he's voting for Trump. And essentially, it came down to he's less racist. They're both racist, Biden and Trump. But Trump's less racist, so he's got my vote, right? And I look at Royce. I'm not kidding you. I will find this video and send it to you. But this is what we come down to: is okay, who's less racist? That is ridiculous. I mean, I'm sure, like many people in America, job growth, education, healthcare, those are some important things to think about and come up with solutions when it comes to a candidate running for president or any public office. As I have experienced over the past 4 years, empathy, compassion, sympathy, the ability to calm a nation when we're dealing with some bad stuff, that's also important. So when I hear people talking about Trump is strong because he yelled during a debate and literally behaved like a toddler, a spoiled toddler that needed to be spanked, it just infuriates me. It infuriates me that somebody could look at that and go, I want 4 more years of that. That is ridiculous. Or the fact that, and you brought it up at the beginning of the program, I'm sorry, when I found out Trump had COVID, I laughed. And yes, it might have been bad, but that was my initial human reaction. Because the fact is, and they can spin it on Fox News as much as they want, and the White House can spin it as much as they want. That man openly campaigned that masks were not necessary. He fought with his own medical team to say, no, they were mistaken. I think they heard the question wrong. He made it clear how he stood on when it came to masks, when it came to social distancing, by how he handled rallies. He made it clear that he didn't want to listen to anyone when it came to how to handle COVID.
So I agree with you, but I have a question about that. Why do you think he did that?
Because he's stubborn.
Because
This
he
is
doesn't
one of the
want to
reasons
look
this man got elected. People saw that because he didn't listen to anybody and he did whatever he wanted to do, that showed a sign of strength.
Yeah.
But so if we agree that power's responsibility is to ensure that it stays in power, and he's utilizing the tools that kept him in power, no different than what Biden is doing now and telling me how I'm black or not or whatever,
Yeah.
right? He's utilizing the tools that have kept him there for 40 plus years. So my question would be, outside of me being like emotionally triggered by it, what's the difference between the two people using what got them to where they've been?
Strangely enough, I had this conversation this morning. Honestly, it comes down to it. Power corrupts. It really comes down to how you use that power. The conversation I had with someone today, I saw Lindsey Graham do a photo op with one of the organizers of the Proud Boys. And this is what, days after the debate and the whole, condemning white supremacy. And I'm thinking to myself, what is wrong with the Republican Party? Because I seriously saw that as a slap in the face, because there was already even Republicans that were like, he did not handle that question well. Like, that should have been a no-brainer. It is not hard to say I condemn white supremacy. I don't understand why that's so hard. Somebody sent me a photo of Biden taking a picture with a guy who used to run a chapter of the Ku Klux Klan. And he asked me, how is this different from what Lindsey Graham did or what Trump is having difficulty saying? This is how I feel. And it really comes back to that empathy and really learning from mistakes. I'm not saying Biden's perfect. Far from it. Man has said things that I'm like, dude, I can see where he's coming from. Because honestly, the thing you talked about when he went and said, if you have to choose between me or Trump, you're not black. I didn't take offense to that, because honestly, I don't understand a black person that would support Trump. I really don't. But that's me. But I'm also one that will investigate when somebody sends me something. So that particular picture that a person sent me was not recent. It was actually before this person who ran the chapter of the Ku Klux Klan. What he didn't mention, which I feel is always, I feel when it comes to narrative, people aren't being really fully clear about stuff when they talk about it. He is a former member. He realized he was wrong. He left the organization, ended up becoming like one of the most favorable people by NAACP. He changed. He realized where he went wrong. He realized his beliefs were wrong. He realized that he was wrong. I've seen Biden do that too.
So hold on, wait. So can you hear me?
Here's my point. Trump won't do that. You will never see Trump admit when he's made a mistake, or even when he misquoted something, because that's a sign of weakness. And frankly, to me, that's how you grow. If you make a mistake, if you realize you did something wrong, and you can say, I did that wrong, and this is what I'm going to do, and actually do it, that's a sign to me of growth. That's why Trump will never grow. Just like, was it today? Oh, no, sorry, yesterday. He went on Twitter and talked about how he's learned in the 3 days he's had COVID. He's learned and he gets it. And he really understands where people are coming from. And then goes out and does a photo op when he's supposed to be quarantined. That to me shows me that that's the difference for me. It might not be for anybody else, but it's for me.
But if in my learning it's going to cause me to not be reelected, why would I? What incentive do I have to do that in the next 6 weeks?
Well, see, that's the thing.
Because you're a fucking human being.
Yeah.
Nobody would. I don't think anybody would do that. I'm just being honest. I don't.
But that's what I'm saying, is when it comes down to picking a candidate, and people don't have to agree with what I'm saying. This is just how I feel. Like I got you. While the talking points of education, job growth, all of that is very important for this country, so is having a leader that's a freaking human being. If you are unable to understand why people are upset when you go out and make a statement of people died, that is what it is, and there's families sitting at home that lost someone from COVID, saying, what? I know that right now, because of the environment we're in, people are still seeing the things that Trump does is some form of strength. And honestly, when it comes down to it, those type of people, they're not going to change their view. But for me, yes, the candidates themselves, like you said, is not going to look at that, especially Trump, and go, well, yeah, I sound like an asshole, but I'm not going to change what I do because I want to win. It's about winning for me. Because frankly, when it comes down to it, one's looking to change the country and one's looking to win a game. Trump sees the election, he sees being president, he sees running this country as a game, another reality TV show that he could be on.
So we have one of our regular friends from the show say, I don't understand a black person that would support Biden. He did a Klansman's eulogy, which
so he's referring to.
TL.
I had to look this up.
Individual that was the former Klansman that he went to he did the eulogy for. But that's what I talk about is if that man was still Klan, no. Then I would have been upset seeing that photo. And
so it's interesting because he so this article that I found, I just Googled it, found an article on Newsweek. So it's interesting because we're talking about Senator Byrd, who Biden and Obama both spoke at his funeral. And it's like the whole thing is just, it's frustrating to read because here you have, first off, Byrd's apologies. I know now I was wrong. So this is the senator that died, who used to be a recruiter for the KKK. Yeah. I know now I was wrong. Intolerance has no place in America. I apologized 1,000 times, and I don't mind apologizing over and over again. I can't erase what happened.
Nope.
And so right there, I also need to highlight how toxic masculinity interacts with racism right here, because part of what we're talking about in this whole discussion is actually, I see as toxic masculinity. That centers around a fear of looking weak, right? And it shows up in the, I have to win at any cost, all that stuff shows up in, I can't wear a mask because it looks weak, all this stuff. And bluntly, I think Biden has been guilty of it too. Like, he's not my favorite for damn sure. But the way Byrd apologizes here, I can't erase what happened, doesn't need to be said. When we did something in the past that we truly regret, and this is one of the things this article points out, is that it's really unclear whether he meant it or not, and which is an argument that we have to look at credibly. And I find credibility in the notion that he probably didn't totally lose all of his white supremacist background, because there's constantly this thread of, I can't erase it. If you want to express regret. Don't act like you're a victim for being called out on your bullshit. So that right there, I have an open question about whether Byrd really regretted it or whether he had to abandon it because he lost after he filibustered for 14 hours. And Biden's worship of him is pretty fucked up. And if I have to look at that and compare that to the white supremacist dog whistle stuff that's coming out of the White House right now, I can't compare it. It's not the same, just like not all racism is the same and not all sexism is the same. Is Biden a racist? Yes. I certainly think so. Is he problematic in so many ways? Absolutely. But there's a difference between saying it's okay to lynch people and saying, okay, I'll give some of our friends, our MAGA supporter friends, a pass on this. There's a difference between it's saying it's okay to lynch somebody and I don't believe white privilege exists.
And frankly, when it comes down to it, Byrd, well, he's passed now, but he had to live with that. He made the decision to carry those beliefs and be a part of an organization. And so even though I still see it that I can only believe what I feel. And the fact is, if he really still believed it, he would be in that organization. So, but either way, even though he left it and he has said,
he renounced it.
Yeah. He still has to live with it.
Yep.
So that is the one thing I will say is that I kind of feel like that's different than, somebody going up to a white person and being like, you're racist because you're white, and not knowing that individual is in a sense that, oh goodness, it's like the video I sent you guys, the music video of the individual,
McDonald.
Tom McDonald.
Hmm.
And I remember when my friend showed me this video the first time, which it's called White Boy. And it talks about the fact that that's what's happening in this country. And like I said, you should be confronting people that are racist. You should be like, and some of them are right at your dinner table. If you're saying remarks that are racist remarks, one of the first things you should do is stand up and be like, that's not right. And if you don't, you're helping that situation. But when does it become? I mean, is it really okay? Is that what our narrative is going to be? That it's just no, they're white, and that's it. That's how they are. They're part of the narrative of what our past is. I mean, I sometimes think, which is weird saying that I'm a Black woman, but how is that different to judge somebody that you don't know? You're literally looking at a white person and pointing to them and saying you're racist. And this person could have been, supportive of everything, outright telling people in public, you're an asshole if you're saying that Black people are X, Y, and Z.
Hey, I mean, here's why. Because as somebody who does that work, if somebody looks at me and says you're racist, I'm gonna say yeah. Because I know what I've done in my life. I know the times when I let that shit slide. I know the times when I participated in racism, and I just have to admit, yeah.
So would you admit that you're a misogynist as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I do also think it's worth noting that one of the challenges here is that in this country we conflate what people do to who they are. Part
Yes.
of we have to start creating more and more space there. There are people who I'm comfortable looking at what they do and saying, you're fucking racist. And there are other people that I want to be able to say, that was a really racist thing to say.
Yeah.
And I'd rather have that small scale discussion and I think that small scale discussion is a much better way to have it. But again, like if somebody comes up to me and says, Royce, you're a racist, I have to stop and say, shit, yeah. But what did I do that, that portrayed that? Because I don't want to be participating in it.
Just to take a step back, because I feel like I just did what some politicians do, is I completely overstepped the whole Byrd conversation and what the viewer asked. So unfortunately, until things change, because honestly, I think we need to burn down the two-party system and just not.
Amen. Glory. Hallelujah.
Yeah. So until that happens, and I hope this whole experience of what we've seen in the past 4 years starts that change. We are still in that narrative of we will always have the lesser of two evils. For me, the lesser is Biden. So that's unfortunately where I'm at. Because I could say, well, I'm just not going to vote. I don't feel that really solves the problem. And it actually, in a sense, exacerbates it more because it's now another vote that's not going into the process of like putting somebody in there that can make a difference in the White House. And I don't feel that Trump is that person. And I actually started going through the process of, because the other conversations I would have is when Trump supporters would tell me, well, he's done more for the Black community than any other president in the whole wide world. And so I'm just kind of like, and it could be because I'm in New Mexico and I'm not experiencing the love and flow of Trump's blessings. It could be.
Well, I mean, do you think that there were people who felt that way of 8 years with Obama in office? That felt the opposite of how you feel?
When I had my interview, I was interviewed for a documentary about voting. And I was actually asked the question, do you feel that you felt the effects of voting? Like picking a candidate that said they would do X, Y, Z. Do you feel that you felt the effects of what they said was going to happen? And I told them no. And I do feel it might be a sense of and to be clear, I am no political historian. I don't know like every bit of history when it comes to politics. That's just not me. I'm more of a common sense person. Like if something doesn't make sense, I'm just kind of like, that doesn't make sense, and I will point that out. But I do feel that a lot of the stuff that politicians promise and policies that get put into place is not distributed evenly in this country. So me living in New Mexico, I don't feel like I see what is promised, what is created by the White House here, unlike Washington or New York. Or like I feel big states get that benefit and they see it. I feel here in New Mexico, we don't get that.
I'm kind of glad for that. I don't want people paying attention to Albuquerque and New Mexico too much because I like it here. And I'm glad that they don't know that we're part of the U.S. I'm okay with that.
We're part of Mexico, so you know.
That's funny. That's a problem in itself.
No, I mean the hilarious story about that is that the governor sent not our current governor, our former governor, wasn't it Martinez? She sent out a bunch of letters to the populace that the post office sent back because there wasn't enough postage on them to go to Mexico.
Yeah.
This is within our own state. This happened. So yeah. There you go.
So, so yeah, I feel like there's this imbalance of just many different topics when it comes to when a president says, I've done more for the Black community than anyone else. And from what I've researched, what I found, when it comes to what Trump has done, a lot of the stuff he's claiming to have done for the Black community was started in the process of Obama starting it. Now, there's one thing I learned during Obama being in office. I learned that a president only has so much power. Because really, when it comes down to it, the legislative is the one that's making up the rules. So he gets veto power. But really, when it comes down to it, these campaign promises that that candidates make, it's literally just sometimes blowing smoke up your butt. Because some of that stuff they can't really enforce. They have to go through this process and get bipartisan support. And so it's not like they can say it and then they get in office and boom, it happens. It's not how that works. That's one of the reasons that I really started to pay attention. There was a rapper, I believe his name is Yellow, of all things, that made me realize what we should be starting to pay attention to when it comes to politics. And that was the legislative. They make the laws. So, and that happens every 2 years. And I am guilty of being somebody who walked into that ballot booth not knowing who any of those people are and just stepping off because they're Democrats.
No, I do. I know. I vote candidate. I know who they are. I know their stance. I watch C-SPAN. So I look at that stuff. I watch C-SPAN.
Good for you. I feel that that's one of the problems that's happening in the country as well. And I'm guilty of it. And I'm working on changing that I am reading up on everybody who's running and really looking at their record and really seeing if they're the right person for the job. Because when it comes down to it, they're deciding what you get to do. They're deciding everything when it comes to this country.
And I think that's the deeper issue. I think you're hitting the nail on the head, which is in our country, in the United States, we are over-entertained, undereducated. As we start to get to the second thing that Donald Trump does very well is love him or hate him, you're talking about him. We're talking about him right now. This show was not even about him, actually. It was about Blackness. And about the last 30 minutes or so have been about him. So it's masterful, whether you like it or not. I mean, he's done a good job of utilizing that, right?
Yeah.
And my thing, going back to how we did start off around, in the Black community and what does that mean? I just think it's really important to be kind of definitive of, we talk about like Candace Owens or the likes, right? People who openly support conservatives, support Donald Trump. People are taking their Black card. And so I'm like, okay, like who's the Blackness Council, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, seriously, I need to talk to these people. You know, let me holler at you for a minute so I can see. Because if you have the power to take and revoke and tell me who or which I mean, how is that any different? Going back to your point, how is that any different than any type of supremacy, male supremacy, white supremacy, in which you have a top down, you must be this, you must say this, you must wear this in order to fit in? That to me is what I'm trying to thwart. And I don't care who it is, whether it's black men at the top of an environment or women or men or LGBTQ or anything in between. There has to be a level of equity that people have, and there has to be level of co-creation and real modeling in order to create belonging. I mean, those are the attributes to me. Now, how you create it, that's different. It has to be localized. It has to be contextualized, and it has to fit into larger ideals. And so when I look at the United States, this is one of the reasons I am happy to be here. I do think that it's a great place to be, but we do have some major problems too. Is because, one, we have to be able to have those real conversations, and then we have to have a willingness to really live up to our potential, which is liberty and justice for all, which is growing into these things. Yeah, we haven't had it. Yeah, it comes on the back of a lot of people, including people that I consider my ancestors and I identify with. But you're right. We have to have a mindset of acknowledging what was, but not living in the fight, but creating a better future. And that's what becomes frustrating for me if people want to know how I put my flag in the ground. When I start talking to people and they're complaining and they're telling me this, I'm like, okay. So what's next? Like, seriously, like what do we do next? Like, I'm with you. Maybe I agree. Maybe I don't. That's kind of irrelevant. What should we be doing?
Exactly.
And that's where you don't get a lot.
A new constitutional Congress.
Bringing up, like, I don't like this only goes so far. Like, okay, so what are you going to do about it? And if their response is like, that is not a
I can't.
You bring up Candace Owens. Like, I made a post on Facebook one day that I was like, oh my God, I just agreed with something with Candace Owens. And people were laughing.
I remember that one.
Oh, update. She said something that was just crazy. Everything's back to normal. I feel when I first heard, I honestly didn't know who Candace Owens was until 4 months ago. I've never heard of her. And then when I started watching some of her videos and just listening to her, it was hard. It was really hard because, especially after this whole last one of Cardi B and the WAP thing and Biden doing an interview with her. And
I didn't watch any of that. That's all propaganda.
I'm just like, oh my God, they're really kidding because it just really upset me. But she started talking about how pretty much he's pandering. He's pandering to the Black community. And this is what he thinks the Black community is. And I'm like, but part of the Black community is that. Just like any community, they are made up of different people. So there are Black folk that love Cardi B. There are Black folk that listen to, like, Barry Manilow. The fact is that there are different Black people, not all Black people.
Royce, who's Barry Manilow, Royce? Tell us. Tell us who's boy.
Barry Manilow. I grew up listening to Barry Manilow because that was like the only pop music my parents would play. They're classic musicians and music teachers. So that was what. Oh, Mandy. We had the greatest hits. two records, 2 LPs. Yeah, there you go. Oh, Mandy.
Okay, so hey, here's the thing. So we hit our time. So we got it. Teresa, I want you to keep that thought because we're going to go because we got an after party we have to record. So keep that thought. But I want to leave everybody with this because we had one of our regular listeners and viewers, Nima Ward, make a comment. And to me, this is true, but it also needs to be applied across the board. To me, that is how we grow into our potential as a country, as people, as a culture, and really as a human race. And she said, not all Black conservatives and Republicans are shunned from the community. Good. That's true. Just like not all white people are racist. So we have to we have to make sure that we keep that all the way around the board. So we thank everybody for listening. We're going to close it out with that one. We got an after party so we can continue this. So you just look at our behind the scenes page that's coming so you can get the rest of the content. All right.
Teresa, we're going to send you a new link.
Yes. Yes. All right.